15% of Detroit landlords moved to immediately evict their tenants right after getting rental assistance payments, and the tenants were not happy about it. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Detroit, Michigan. Now, they actually did a study to figure out what happened to tenants after they received these rental assistance payments, and they were shocked and surprised to find out that landlords still moved forward with evictions in 15% of cases. Now, there's a multitude of reasons for that, but that's not what they are interested in. They're confused. They seem to think that, hey, well, the landlords received rental assistance, so this should help keep these people housed forever, I guess, and the truth of the matter is that the reason that these people needed the rental assistance was because they weren't making their rent payment. And the reason they weren't making those rent payments, well, receiving rental assistance didn't stop that thing from happening. Okay, so if you lost your job, for example, and then you receive some rental assistance money and you are unable to pay your rent, well, unless you get a new job, the landlord is still not getting paid. So they're going to move forward with eviction. Or if you owe more than the rental assistance covered. So I believe most rental assistance programs covered like 15 months of rent. So if you owed more than that, well, guess what? The landlord's going to still move forward with eviction. Okay, so there's a lot of different reasons why, hey, landlords wanted to get those tenants up out of the property. And you know what? Saying that we shouldn't be able to evict them after we receive rental assistance is ridiculous, because simply put, they still violated the terms of their lease. In the real world, when somebody violates the terms of their lease, doesn't pay you the rent that they owe you, you can move forward with the eviction process. So, I'm sure there's more details of this whole scenario going on up in Detroit, but you know what? I imagine that this is very similar to what happened throughout the entire country. This is the reason why a lot of these states, like California, they extended their eviction moratorium so long, because they knew that even with the rental assistance payments, that wasn't going to actually resolve the issue. It's not going to resolve the issue. If this person has trouble paying right now so bad that they need rental assistance from the state, well, a year from now, they're going to need assistance again. 2 years from now. It's never going to be an ending problem. And the only way to resolve it is to look at, these people, they have to take a good look at their finances and realize either I can't afford to live in this place, or we need to move on to somewhere we can afford, or we need to increase our income and work on making sure that we take care of our financial obligations while we're here. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. What do you think of the fact that 15% of landlords within Detroit actually still evicted the tenants after receiving rental assistance payments? Okay, are you surprised by this? Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing? Just tell me your opinion. I love reading the comments, okay? So anyway, let's get into the article because it's quite interesting. This article is coming from the Detroit Metro Times, and it says 15% of Detroit landlords evicted tenants soon after receiving COVID-19 rental aid. The findings suggest many property owners had no intention of helping tenants stay in their apartments. Yeah, okay. So the belief by all of the progressives is that, oh, landlords want to help the tenants stay in their apartments. No, we just want the money we're owed. Okay, we want the money that we are owed. We don't want these tenants who are not paying to stay in our apartments or our houses forever. We want the money that we are owed. If the tenant can pay, they can stay. If not, they gotta go. Anyway, let's get into the article. About 15% of landlords who received federal emergency rental assistance for single-family properties in Detroit moved to evict tenants within 6 months of receiving the funds, according to researchers at the University of Michigan. Those landlords received at least $8.2 million in pandemic-era rental assistance that was intended to stabilize housing for tenants, the analysis by Alexa Eisenberg and Kate Brantley of UM's Poverty Solutions found. The research suggests that some landlords who relied on COVID-19 emergency rental assistance program had no intention of helping tenants remain in their homes. Now, I have a question for these researchers, right? They think that the money was meant to help stabilize housing, right? Well, remember, all of the rental assistance money that's being paid was for past due. Okay, so yeah, for however long that these tenants didn't pay their rent, they had a stable place to stay. And so if you got away, let's say that you didn't pay rent for a full year, and then the rental assistance money paid for that prior year where you got to stay for free. Well, that was your housing stabilized for a year. That doesn't talk about the future. We can't control what happens going off into the future. Once the landlord gets that money, right, that is for a past debt. You've already used the service. This isn't paying for future service. This isn't paying to ensure that these people have somewhere to live for the rest of their lives. That's not our responsibility. Our business is to rent housing to people, okay? It's not to be a charity, a welfare provider, a social housing provider that, oh, well, we're just going to provide housing for these people forever because we receive this rental assistance. What a joke, okay? The programs, even the rental assistance program itself, was not set up that way. It was not set up to have landlords indefinitely hold these people or to keep paying landlords indefinitely so those people can stay there. So they need to have a better understanding of what really is going on here. These figures illustrate that SARA funds were often approved after a landlord had filed a case in court, and that landlords commonly filed new eviction cases against tenants after being approved for funds, the researchers wrote in the report. The crisis is temporary. Evictions after emergency rental assistance in Detroit. Among the 5,600 single-family rental properties where a tenant received at least one rent relief payment between June of 2021 and February of 2022, 842 landlords moved to evict tenants within 6 months of the last recorded SARA approval data. Well, why would that be? Okay, so let's say that you, like I said, you receive your rental assistance payment for the past due rent. Well, if the tenant continues to not pay rent, then more debt accrues. These researchers, they act like they don't have brains or something. Like they can't figure out, well, yeah, the tenant could accrue more debt. Yeah, they can accrue more debt. Yeah. Use your logic here. We're running businesses, okay? If the tenant continues to not pay rent, we're going to file eviction again. And if we do not receive rental assistance for that tenant for the additional rent that is owed, guess what? They got to go. Okay, they've got to go. About 90% of those properties lacked a certificate of compliance at the time SARA was approved. In those instances, the city placed 20% of the landlord's eligible SARA funds in escrow until the properties were in compliance. Of those 757 non-certified properties, only 27 came into compliance between the date SARA approval and the eviction, indicating a lack of motivation among landlords to enhance the safety of their housing conditions. Now, that's an interesting little couple of paragraphs that I just read, right? And let me explain a little bit further. So they're talking about the properties, 90% of the properties lacked a certificate of compliance. Now, I actually did a story a long time ago on the inspections and the property registrations within the city of Detroit, right? And the grand majority of rental properties in Detroit are, they're out of compliance. They are not in compliance because they're it would cost them more money to fix these properties up than if they got dinged by an inspector, then it would even be worth. And so a lot of landlords, they're just like, what, screw this. We're not even going to register our properties. That way they don't have to be inspected. We don't have to go through any of that nonsense, right? Now, I'm not saying that's what they should be doing, but that is what they are doing. That is the reality of the situation. So most of the properties in Detroit, the rental properties, are not in compliance. And they were still approved for these rental assistance funds. Now they cut some of what was owed to the landlord away because they weren't in compliance. Okay, and that might be further reason why, hey, well, this landlord, they never got all the money that they were actually owed, and now they want to get rid of this tenant. So there's a lot of different factors that go into this whole thing. Okay. To help stabilize housing for tenants struggling to pay rent during the pandemic, Congress allocated 46.6 million for the SARA program in 2021. The funds used to pay up to 18 months of past and future rent. Tenants were eligible for assistance if they made less than 80% of the annual median income for a household in their metropolitan area and had a COVID related hardship. So it sounds like, they would pay up to 18 months, but what happens after that 18 months? Okay, that's the real question. After that, if the tenant owes more than 18 months of rent, does the landlord then have the right to still seek eviction against the tenant? If the landlord continues to not pay even after getting the rental assistance, does the landlord have the right to an eviction? And the from the appearance of the article, they don't think the landlord should. Okay, they think the landlord should not have the right to evict the tenant, even though they are still owed money. So yeah, funny that they did this research, but it's not surprising. I'm not surprised at all. I'm actually surprised that it's not a higher number than that, because my guess is that a lot of people who were suffering from so supposedly suffering from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and were unable to pay their rent, a lot of them are the exact same people who would be unable to pay their rent even if there never was a pandemic, okay? And they would be going through the eviction process already, whether there was a pandemic or not. So, yeah, interesting study, but nothing surprising in it.